Listen closely, because what I'm about to tell you isn't just a story. It's a warning, a tale of greed, arrogance, and consequences so poetic you'll swear fate had a hand in writing it. And before I dive in, make sure you hit that subscribe button because stories like this, raw, unfiltered, and dripping with twists, are the kind of truth no one else will dare to share with you. Now let's talk about how the Homeowners Association, in all its smug, power-drunk glory, tried to poison the lake behind my house to stop me from fishing, not realizing that very same water was the one flowing straight into their own pipes, their showers, their sinks, their precious glasses of iced tea, and it all began with something so simple, so innocent, that you wouldn't believe it could spiral into war. It started with me sitting on the back porch, cheap rod in hand, bobber floating lazily in the shimmering water, the sun dipping low behind the trees, painting streaks of orange and purple across the lake, the kind of scene you'd expect on a postcard, but for me it was just peace, the one place where I could escape the stress of my job, the endless wall letters about the color of my mailbox or the length of my grass, and the suffocating politeness of neighbors who were more spies than friends. But apparently, peace was the one thing the WA didn't want me to have, because the moment they spotted me with a fishing pole, the storm began brewing. At first it was subtle, an email from the association president claiming fishing was strictly prohibited, for the preservation of aesthetic harmony, whatever the hell that means, then a letter threatening fines if I didn't cease unauthorized activity, as if catching a couple bass was on par with vandalism, and I laughed it off, thinking they'd get bored, but I underestimated just how far these people would go. The thing about HOAs is they're like cults, small kingdoms where ordinary people suddenly feel like monarchs, clutching at scraps of power with claws sharper than you'd ever imagine, and our president, Mrs. Linda Ashcroft, was the worst of them all, a woman who wore pearls to mow her lawn, who smiled with lips tighter than a purse string, who thought running the WA made her some kind of queen, and when she realized I wasn't going to fold, that I wasn't about to trade my rod for obedience, her smile cracked, revealing something uglier underneath, so she rallied the board, whispered lies about me, polluting the water, or introducing invasive species, and at the next meeting, which I didn't attend because frankly I'd rather eat nails, they voted unanimously to take protective action, and that was the night the lake began to die. I noticed it first in the smell, faint at first, like something sour lingering in the breeze, but by the second day the fish were floating belly up, eyes glazed, mouths gaping at the surface as if gasping for help, and the water itself had taken on a sickly green hue, unnatural, chemical, with a slick film that clung to the reeds and shimmered like oil. And when I knelt at the bank, dipping my fingers in, I felt the sting, sharp and bitter, like bleach on a wound, and that's when I knew. They had poisoned it, deliberately, maliciously, a crime against nature itself just to keep me from casting a line. But what they didn't know, and what would become their downfall, was that the lake wasn't just decoration, wasn't just a pond for swans or ducks to glide across. It was the source, the reservoir that fed the very water towers pumping life into every faucet in our neighborhood, the veins that carried their drinking water, and they had tainted it themselves. But instead of rushing to stop it, they doubled down, smug in their belief that they had won, that I'd be too heartbroken by the dead fish to keep pushing, and for a moment they were right. I sat on my porch staring at the lake like a battlefield, the smell of rot heavy, the silence deafening without the croak of frogs or the splash of minnows, and rage burned in me hotter than anything I'd ever felt, because fishing wasn't just a hobby, it was a connection, a tradition, something my grandfather had taught me, something I hoped to one day pass on, and to see it destroyed by people drunk on power was more than I could stomach. So I started digging, not with a rod, but with research, public records, water reports, anything that could prove what they had done, and that's when the real twist came, because the poison they used wasn't some harmless algae treatment. It was industrial pesticide, the kind banned in most states, strong enough not only to wipe out fish but to seep into the soil, into pipes, into every ounce of water running into their homes, and the symptoms would start subtle. Headaches, nausea, that metallic taste in the mouth they couldn't quite explain. Sure enough, within weeks the whispers began, neighbors complaining on community forums about sudden rashes, children with stomachaches, older residents feeling dizzy, and while the WA dismissed it all as seasonal flu, or bad tap filters, I knew better, because I'd collected samples, jars of the foul water, dead fish sealed in bags, Photos timestamped of the night they dumped barrels by the shore under the cover of darkness, thinking no one was watching, but my trail camera caught everything, the grainy footage of shadows pouring liquid into the lake, and while they thought they had silenced me, I was quietly building a case that could burn them to the ground. But here's where it gets darker. The HOA wasn't just reckless, they were desperate, because when the sickness spread too far to ignore, when local news began sniffing around after a child ended up hospitalized, they didn't own up. Instead, they tried to frame me, claiming I had illegally dumped chemicals while fishing, that I was the one who killed the lake, and for a while, people believed them. After all, I was the outcast, the guy who never went to block parties, the one who challenged the rules, and gossip spreads faster than truth, so suddenly I wasn't just a man who lost his peace, I was a villain, accused of poisoning my own water, and the HOA thought they had won again, that I'd be ruined by their lies. But arrogance blinds, and they didn't realize that I'd already sent everything I had. Samples, photos, footage, to a lawyer friend of mine, someone who owed me a favor, and when the lab results came back, stamped and certified, they told a story that couldn't be denied. The pesticide was traced directly to a landscaping company contracted exclusively by the HOA, purchased under Mrs. Ashcroft's name, invoices signed, payments logged, and suddenly the mask slipped, the narrative shattered. The fallout was brutal. Lawsuits rained down like hail, the EPA swarmed in, health inspectors combed through pipes and soil, and neighbors who once glared at me now turned their fury on the board, demanding answers, demanding resignations, because their children were sick, their gardens dead, their trust shattered, and Mrs. Ashcroft, the Queen of Pearls, was left stammering on the steps of her pristine porch as reporters shoved microphones in her face, her empire crumbling. But here's the final twist. Justice didn't bring me joy, not the way I thought it would, because even as the HOA collapsed, the lake was still dead, the fish gone, the water fouled, and no lawsuit or fine could bring it back to what it was, and I realized then that power isn't just about winning battles, it's about what you lose in the process, and while the HOA had poisoned themselves with their own arrogance, I too had lost something irreplaceable, something sacred, and maybe that was the cruelest truth of all. So if you've ever dealt with an HOA, if you've ever felt that simmering frustration at people who think a little power makes them gods, remember this story. Remember that when they try to control everything, they often end up destroying themselves, and remember too that the peace you fight for is worth every ounce of resistance. And if you want more stories like this, dark, real, and laced with the kind of twists you can't make up, make sure you subscribe, because the world is full of tales like mine, and I promise you, the next one will make your jaw drop even further.